Thanks for stopping by at the Life of a Career podcast. We're exploring the life of people and their careers. Even though we are in the digital age, access to careers and career advice from professionals is still very much gated by wealth, status, pedigree, and personal resources. At Mentor Access, we are bringing life to careers and jobs by proliferating access to professionals and mentors for those who may not have personal connections to different industries. Our mission is to open up access to professional stories that might one day inspire children, students, and other job seekers who might otherwise settle for a career path because they weren't privileged enough to know about other opportunities. In today's episode, we are speaking with Keri Mao. She is a monitoring, evaluations, accountability, and learning technical advisor at ADRA International, a humanitarian organization. Thanks again for joining us at the Life of a Career podcast hosted by Mentor Access. Now let's meet Keri. All right. Hi, Keri. Thanks for joining us at the Life of a Career podcast. Before we get started, can you give us a quick description of who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thanks for having me on here. My name is Keri Mao. I am a technical advisor for monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning, also known as MEAL. And I work for a company called ADRA International. ADRA stands for Adventist Development and Relief Agency. And we are an international faith-based humanitarian agency.
Okay. Yeah, I can't wait to hear what all that entails. But before we get into sort of day to day and what you do in the humanitarian space, is this what you always wanted to do as a kid?
No, I didn't know this existed actually. Or, because as a child, you just see like kind of the main career paths like medicine or science, things like that. So this was never really on my radar. No.
What were on your radar, and what was it? What was the community education system? What was it trying to push you towards?
When I was in grade school and part of high school, I actually wanted to be an anesthesiologist. I
Oh,
wanted to take the doctor route because that's all I knew, medicine. And then I quickly realized how long it took to become an anesthesiologist, and I said, "No, I don't think that's for me."
okay. Wow, you wanted to be a doctor when you were little.
Yeah. Hmm.
Did you do things in that path, like in high school? Did you take any internships? Did you work at a hospital at all to sort of give you that gauge of, hey, this is a very long path, and I don't even know if I'll enjoy being an anesthesiologist? Um,
Yes and no. I did shadow my mom, who was in the medical field. She's a medical technologist, which we'll get to that part in a little bit. But the only person I knew that was an anesthesiologist was my great aunt, and I just thought it was like really cool. So I was like, yeah, that's what I want to be, and like not really knowing what that all entailed. So yeah.
what was it that was appealing about it? I think the only thing I know about anesthesiologists is knocking people out, right? Is
Yeah, to me it just seemed like kind of easy. I was like, well, you just put people to sleep and then you don't really have to deal with them, because I wanted to help people, but not like in a very like direct sense. Um, so that was kind of like, well, if I become a doctor, that sounds like really cool. I don't have to like interact a ton with them, but I can still be a doctor and help people. Um, I was very naive, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think being naive and trying to go down the path of anesthesiology is a really good naivety, though, because if you went down that path, you would have done fine career wise, right?
Right, right.
So when you were in high school, then did you make a decision at some point where like, hey, I'm not going to go down this medical route, or did you continue to go down that path even into college? Was it sort of, hey, I'm just going to do it, I'm not sure what I want, but I'm going to continue down this path, or
Yeah.
did something change?
So in my senior year of high school, when you start thinking about, where you're going to go to college, what are you going to major in, what classes are you going to take, and I was realizing how long it takes to become a doctor and to specialize in something, and I said, that seems like a long time. Let me see if I can go a shorter route and then decide later. And so what I did was I decided to become a dual major The first one was medical laboratory science, which is basically medical technology, which is what my mom does, and also major in music because that was my whole entire life. I had been playing violin since the age of 3. I had taught violin since the age of like 14. I was in so many like orchestras and groups, and I was playing for church and all these different things. So music was really my life, and so I said, I'll double major in something practical and something maybe not as practical, but I know. And so I did that for 3 years, um, and then realized very quickly that that's not really what I wanted to do. And I had like a major life crisis.
The music side or the medical technology side?
Both, both.
Both. So music wasn't, you realized music wasn't even a passion? I was
Well,
about to ask.
yeah, so I knew that I loved it. I was good at it at that time. Um, but I also knew it wasn't really practical because, coming from a family who is like, you need to do something practical, something that will make money, which is why I chose the medical laboratory science major because I said, okay, I can work in this field and save up money, and then I can just do whatever I want later on. And so that kind of was what my thinking was. Do something that's practical, that you can get a job in, and then you can do something else. I wanted to become like a marine biologist or something like that later on. My parents were like, no. So I was like, well, I'll become a med tech and then I'll become a marine biologist afterwards. But then, yeah, 3 years into it, I was like, okay, one, music is not practical. Two, MLS is not my passion. I can't see myself in a lab in a hospital like all the time. So, had a major life
Okay.
crisis.
And then how did you get through that life crisis?
A lot of tears were shed. A lot of hard conversations were had. Um, Obviously, my parents were very, very disappointed, um, because you know I had spent 3 years of my life, you know, trying to do something, and then all of a sudden being like, "Ooh, I don't think this is what I want to do in my life." And it was really difficult because, for me, transitioning into something else was very hard, and trying to make the decision to do something else. It was really difficult because I had this path set out. Like, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and then this comes afterwards. It was very linear. And so for me to wake up and realize that this is not what I was supposed to do, what I was meant to do, was really difficult. I had to have conversations with close friends about this, and one of my best friends, she talked to me and she said, "What do you see yourself doing in 10 years?" Um, and I thought about it, and one of the things that came up was, I really would love to help people in a community setting. Maybe not like one on one directly, like in a medical setting, but um, in a community setting. Because I had gone on a lot of volunteer trips through my church, and I had been able to see different settings internationally, and see what could be done. And I wanted to be able to do that full time, but and also sustainable. Sustainable. So that was something I started thinking about. She's like, okay, well, let's find a route for that. How do we do that? And so what came up was public health, and I only knew one person that had gone into public health in my whole life. And so I had a conversation with her, and I said, I think this is what I want to do. I'm not sure. My parents are going to hate it because it's new to them. They don't know what this is. And like, how do I navigate this? And she told me something that I'll never forget. She said, this is your life. This is not their life. This is your life. You're going to have to make that decision of what's best for you. And she had to make really hard decisions too in her life because she had actually been accepted to medical school, and then decided to forego that and go into public health instead. So that was a really difficult decision for her as well. So yeah, I thought about it, I prayed about it, and After a while, I was like, yeah, I think public health is what I was meant to do. And having that discussion with my parents was also really, difficult. They're like, "What's public health? Can you get a job?" Because that's what they're thinking. And so I had to do a lot of research. I had to talk to people. Um, I went back to college that semester after this whole life crisis, and I talked to my advisor, and I said, "Hey, look, this is what happened over the summer. Um, but what I think I want to do is public health." He's like, "Oh, that's really interesting because actually one of our sister schools, they're coming to recruit for their public health program over in California." And I was like, "They have a public health program?" And he's like, "Yeah, because that our sister school is really known for their medical program, their dental program, their pharmacy program." And I had no idea that they had a school of public health. But the next week they were coming to recruit for the School of Public Health. And so I talked to them. They got in touch with me. A bunch of professors, reached out to me, and just things snowballed after that, and getting me into the program to do my master's there.
When you were going about talking to all these people, um, were was it was because of the crisis that you sort of just went out there? Did you have a plan on how you were going to break this problem set down, or was it just, I'm going to talk to everyone and try to figure out what my life is, and then
Basically,
even
yeah.
yeah, and then discovering public health? Could you actually describe what public health is like compared to what medicine is? Because the word health is in there,
Hmm.
and I'm sure it's probably confusing to some. I'm surprised that your parents who were in the medical field didn't know what public health is. So now I'm curious, like, what
Right.
is that distinction?
Yeah. So public health is really improving um, lives of people in the communities, preventing disease, things like that. And I went down the global health route, and that's really improving the quality of people's lives, especially those who are, in vulnerable settings or marginalized, things like that. Public health is very interesting because it's so broad, and I think that's actually what appealed to me. Because so I went down the global health route, but there's also public health and nutrition, public health and health education. You can work for the state, the county, the government, internationally. Um, and interestingly enough, like I work now in an international setting, but I also worked actually as a military contractor for the Army Public Health Center.
Wow.
And so you can get so many different experiences within public health, which I think is the beauty of it. Um, so it's very broad. I mean, think for instance, the COVID-19 pandemic. Public health was the forefront of that. Getting the information out there, vaccinations, health education, all of that, all the coordination that had to happen. That was public health. That's just like one of the many different aspects of public health.
So public health is more like the implementation of policy or execution to support like a the health of a population, right? Rather
Hmm.
than individually, it's like, what type of things can we implement? Um, you know, vaccine programs or drinking water type of health related things. Is that the distinction between that and medicine?
That's an aspect of it, yeah. So it is policy and planning. It is the education part of healthy living, healthy lifestyles, things like that. Um, like yeah, like nutrition, public health nutrition. There's actually also public health nursing, and a lot of doctors also get their public health degree too because they want to have that. They want to have. Uh, the wholeness of it, not just treating, but also preventing. Um, I know a few dentists that have gotten their public health degree, as well as pharmacists. They also get their public health degree too. So it's not just for, outside of the medical field, but it's also for people in the medical field.
Okay, that interesting. It makes sense, especially since they have a technical knowledge
Hmm.
of like the details. Um, so then once you went down this public health path, um, what came about it? Did you have specific internships that were aligned with the public health side? You said you were a contractor for the Army. Um, was that after graduation? What was next?
Yeah, so once I figured out that that's what I wanted to do, I had to figure out, how do I get there. So there's not a lot of public health bachelor degrees or undergraduate degrees. It's more of a master's and doctorate level. So I had to make sure I had the right prerequisites. I already had one of them actually, which was microbiology, but I had to have anatomy and physiology. So I took that class. So I finished college with a degree in music as well as a minor in biology.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so then I entered at Loma Linda University. I did the global health public health program there, and I had a lot of opportunity there. The great thing about that program was they worked hand in hand with some of the local communities there, and we also did overseas like an international research project, which was really cool. So we did like how is climate change affecting nutrition and food security in the Philippines. So we had the opportunity to do that, which was really great. So then after I graduated, interestingly enough, I hopped on a plane and went over to visit family in Malaysia. And I was only supposed to be gone for 3 months. And I was like, I'm just going to take this time for myself. Then I'm going to go look for jobs because I'm a new graduate and, just going to get experience and things like that. Well, 3 months turned into 8 months. I was actually freelancing as a dive master and just hanging out with my family and traveling Southeast Asia.
Nice.
Not exactly what I had planned, but it was actually really difficult to find opportunities for a new grad, a master's, new grad. And it was really difficult. I was, applying for jobs. I was applying for internships and not really getting very much. I had a few interviews here and there, but it wasn't anything, substantial. So I started getting a little frustrated, like, hey, I just spent this much time and energy and money into great, this great degree, and I'm ready to like go save the world. And it's like it was just a lot more difficult than I thought it was, and come to realize that there's this interesting link that where you are overqualified for some jobs and underqualified for other jobs. So that's when I really started looking at internships, and I really believe in the power of internships, a good internship. And I applied for one with World Vision International. And I got accepted to that internship in their Seattle or Federal Way location. I was interned there for 6 months as a monitoring and evaluation intern. And so that started really the humanitarian aspect of my career, of being able to see what goes on in a headquarters location and office, and getting that experience. After those 6 months, I was accepted into another internship, and this one was overseas. This was international, with ADRA Nepal. So I went overseas to Nepal and lived there for a year as an intern.
Oh, wow.
And the office there is actually a branch of the current agency that I work for now. So I spent a year there just working in different capacities, just getting experience in all different aspects of like a day-to-day basis. So for like education, communication, health, business development. What else did I do? I did random things, and it was really fun. And it was just really cool to see what goes on in an office in the field. What do they do? How do they implement projects? How do they get the funding? How do they monitor it? Things like that. So once I came back from Nepal, I was trying to find a job in the humanitarian sector again, but I wasn't really finding what I wanted. I was really tired at that time because I had been moving around so much, and so I was like, I just really want to stay put for a little bit. And so this opportunity with the Army came up. So I became it was actually a fellow position, but really a contractor for the Army Public Health Center, and I was a program evaluator. So we evaluated the health and wellness programs at the Army, and it gave me a really good experience with evaluation, but also in a subsector that I had never really thought about. Like no one really thinks of that. When you go into global health, you think like international or even domestic, but you don't really think Army. You don't think military. But this is like a subpopulation that was really cool to work with. And it really opened my eyes and expanded my worldview about, what is public health? What can I do with public health? And things like that. So I spent about a year and a half in that position. I really, really loved it. And then landed into the my current agency.
How did you go from how did you find the Army fellowship? Was that something you applied for? Did you know someone that introduced you to it, and that's how you did the application? Like well how did the opportunity arise? I guess.
Yeah, that's a funny story because so I was starting to look for positions or jobs as my internship in Nepal was closing. There was a couple that I had interviewed for. I was even interviewing for some to stay in Nepal. And those didn't really pan out. And so I was talking to my parents one day, and my dad actually worked for the Army his whole career. He was a civilian, and he said, "Oh, my boss's daughter is working at the Army. She's working at like a biology lab. It's this fellowship that she got." And he was explaining to me. I'm like, "Dad, I don't do biology lab things," you know. He was like, "Just send me your resume," and I was like, "Dad, I don't think you understand what I do." And he was like, "No, just send me your resume," and he kept on asking me for like 3 months, and I was like, "Okay, fine," just to get him off my back. I was like, "Okay, fine, I'll send it." So I updated my resume, I sent it over to him. I guess he gave it to his boss. His boss gave it to someone. Someone gave it to someone, and then eventually it landed onto my my future boss's desk. And they saw my experience, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we could really use someone like this." So they reached out to me and said, "Would you be interested in interviewing?" And so I actually interviewed with 2 departments. Um, and so they were like, "Okay, if you're interested in this, let us know. We'll do like an official interview and have you go through the official process." And so when I started, talking with them and looking at the actual program, I was like, "Oh, actually, yeah, this is like perfect for what I am interested in and everything." Because my culminating project in my master's was actually on active transportation. So I did a baseline survey of bicycling in Loma Linda for healthy communities. So it was all about active transportation and bicycling and all of the stuff. And one of the departments at the Army that what they were evaluating was active transportation and built environment and things like that. So it was a kind of like perfect fit for me at that point. And so I didn't realize when my dad was talking to me, I guess he probably didn't realize either that the public health center was like way larger. It wasn't just a biology lab. And so yeah, after I went through that whole application and process and interview, then they hired me.
Okay. And then what did you in that experience? You said that you learned things that you didn't even realize that was part of the sort of the subset
Mm-hmm.
population. And you said you were doing like the active transportation. Like what is that exactly?
Yeah, so active transportation is like instead of taking like your own car, your own car, or like um, buses or planes or whatever. It's really like walking, taking your bicycle, using your bicycle, things like that, where you're actively moving to get from point A to point B, and looking at the infrastructure for that. So if you go to a neighborhood, like, are there sidewalks? Are there
Hmm.
bicycle lanes? Is there an infrastructure? Is there an environment that supports this? So it's something I always look at when I, go somewhere like, "Oh, hey, look, there's really cool bicycle lanes, or, good sidewalks that, connect from one point to the other point. And just it doesn't just stop somewhere." So that's built environment, and that was one of the projects that I was working on, as well as a nutrition built environment project where um, if you go into like a cafeteria, like is the healthy option the easy option? That was the thing of the project where like is the salad bar like off in the corner where you can't find it, or is it like bam right in front of you? Things like
Hmm.
that.
Were you part of the? I was in the army, so
Oh, okay.
were you part of the people who like labeled like, hey, this is red, this is bad food, and this is green, this is good food? Like, were you part of that?
So I was so I wasn't part of the team that implemented that. I was part of the team that evaluated that.
Hmm. Okay,
Yeah.
got
Yes.
it.
But I know exactly what you're talking about because that is
Yeah.
literally the project that we evaluated.
Yeah, I mean, I understand implementation of like policies and trying to encourage us to do the right things. Like, hey, just signal. Like, we don't know any better. We're, you know, we're just we're just doing our military things. You tell us red is bad, green is good. All right,
Right.
go more green, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's super interesting. And then so from there, you said with the army, you you found your way into your current company, or was there a step in between that? I can't remember.
So while I was at the army, I really enjoyed it. I learned so many different things with that subpopulation. Like with active military, with their families, with veterans, things like that, and I really enjoyed it. But I also learned a lot of other evaluation, methods, and realizing that between quantitative and qualitative data, because a lot of data collection and analysis, I really didn't like quantitative data, and I really enjoyed analyzing qualitative data, which sounds super nerdy, but it was something that I learned about myself, and visualizing data, things like that. So I really appreciate that experience. But then, about a year and a half into it, I was realizing that my heart was really in the international humanitarian sector, and so I that's when I started looking for jobs to get back into that sector. And so I was applying, I was looking, and then one of my friends who I had graduated with my master's, we were in the same cohort. She messaged me and was like, "Hey, there's this position open at ADRA. You should apply for it." So I was like, "Okay, what do I have to lose?" So I applied for it. I got a call back. I interviewed. And then it was funny because a couple of weeks later, they're like, actually, we have this other position that we want you to interview for, that we think you would be a better fit for. Would you be interested? And I said, sure. So I interviewed for that. And then like a couple weeks later, they're like, actually, we have another position that we want you to interview for, and we think that you would be a really great fit for this. So I was like, okay, like at that point, I was just like, I'm just going to interview because like it's a good experience, and whatever comes out of it comes out of it. And so
Hmm.
I interviewed for the third position, and that's the position I eventually got.
Oh, okay. And then, so could you kind of describe a little bit what ADRA does, and then more specifically after that, like what is your role in ADRA?
Sure. Yeah. So ADRA is, as I said, an international faith-based humanitarian agency. We do both development and relief projects. So on the relief side, so just think of it like a disaster that happens. So an earthquake, a typhoon, or hurricane, um, things like that, or like a major fire or flooding. We are boots on the ground. We go to that area. We provide shelter, food, water, immediate needs, things like that. And we have over 100 offices around the world. Um, so it makes it a lot easier to be able to be boots on the ground, that kind of thing. On the development side, we have projects that are a lot longer, anywhere from a year to 5 years, where we work on, protracted emergencies where it's like maybe some area where there's a drought, an ongoing drought, where we need to have food security. We provide livelihood assistance or agriculture assistance, food assistance, drilling wells, making sure there's clean water. Um, also in other projects, we have like mobile units, medical mobile units that go around and give uh, medical aid to people that need it who aren't able to get it, things like that. So ADRA works in health, nutrition, water, sanitation, hygiene. They do food security, livelihoods, and also respond to emergency and disaster situations.
Okay, wow. Is it a nonprofit or is it okay, that's a
Nonprofit,
nonprofit.
yes.
Nonprofit organization. So people can just donate to it if they'd like.
Yes, they
Okay.
can, yes.
We'll get to that down the later in the interview.
Sure.
The uh, so what do you do specifically for them then? I know that that was a very broad overview of everything that they do, very extensive. What was your specific role in that organization?
So my specific role, I'm the technical advisor for monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning, also known as MEAL. It's a mouthful, and everyone's always like, "What is that? What do you do?" So if you break it down, so the monitoring evaluation portion is where we basically we make sure that we are achieving our goal of what we said we were going to do. So that's anywhere from like observing the actual project implementation to collecting data about the things that we're doing within a project, making sure that we're on track to reach our goal. So we have like targets of, X amount of people that we're going to give food assistance to, or X amount of people that we're going to train, and things like that. So we make sure that we're on track, that we're doing what we said we're going to do, basically. The accountability portion is, taking responsibility for our actions, making sure that we're accountable to our beneficiaries, our project participants, our donors, our stakeholders, the community, people like that, making sure that we're doing good work, basically, and empowering the community to be able to give feedback and tell us their complaints, because this program is for them. And we want to make sure that they are getting the best help in the most dignified manner as possible. And then the learning portion of that is just learning throughout the whole project cycle of what are we doing, how can we make it better, how can we take what we've learned in this project and apply it to the rest of the project or to a different project, and things like that.
Okay. Are you participating basically through the full cycle of projects then? Like you have full involvement in the planning, like, hey, this is what we're measuring, this is what we're evaluating, right? And then are you on multiple projects then?
Yes.
Or just think, okay.
Yeah. So my current portfolio, I think I have about 8 projects over 6 countries right now, and I support the meal staff in those countries. But um, I help the whole entire. I help throughout the whole entire project cycle. So from writing the proposal of getting that grant, the funding. I work on the monitoring and evaluation portion of making sure, like, hey, this is what we're going to measure, this is how we're going to measure it, things like that. Once we win that grant or the funding, we get the funding, then I am part of the group that helps make sure that it's being implemented correctly. So we give training, we make sure that our team on the ground knows what the objective is, what they need to do, things like that. And then we help monitor the project throughout the life cycle, and follow up, have meetings. We review a lot of things. We give support to our staff. We just make sure that what's coming through is what we expected, things like that. And then throughout closeout, making sure that we do it sustainably, and we have an exit strategy and things like that. Oftentimes we do get more funding, so then the cycle continues, and things like that. But yeah, that's the basic day to
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. Let's trying to think of how to better shape it, because I kind of understand like large organizational planning is sort of
Hmm.
difficult to talk about like day to day. Like maybe talk about it like what's a work week like? Is it Mondays blocked off for specific meetings And then, is there differences between planning meetings versus, just update meetings? Like, could you kind of describe a little bit of how you interact with everyone, stakeholders, and planning? Because you even have like writing grants, which I think is pretty significant in a nonprofit. Like that's their bread and butter. So you're sort of on the revenue generating side of a nonprofit, like
A little bit,
just
yeah.
kind of, yeah, right. How do you like how do you balance all that, because you're doing it from sales all the way to kind of the operations to make sure that you close the loop on a really good sale, I guess.
That's one way to put it. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting that you asked that, because man, it's really difficult to kind of go through, because I am on so many projects. It's difficult because it doesn't, like, not all projects start at the same time. It's like everything is just going at its own pace. So for instance, like we're working on something where one project's closing out while another one has started 3 months earlier. And then, we have two projects that are kind of in the middle of their cycle. And then we're also working on, proposals and trying to get that grant at the same time. So it's a lot of things happening at the same time. So it's difficult like on a day-to-day basis. Like anything can happen, honestly. So I guess the best way to say it, like on a day-to-day basis, is depending on what is priority. We'll be working on it. So for instance, we'll be working on a final report for a project that's closing out. But at the same time, we're working on like a baseline survey that they just collected data for, and making sure that the report is good to go to the donor. And having that training for the team to make sure that they understand what our objectives are. And then at the same time, making sure that the other projects that you're on are also running smoothly. If there's any questions or things like that are happening, and then at the same time also helping the business development unit with the proposal that they're writing, and trying to get more funding for a specific project or a specific area. So we give assistance and support to them on that. So it's so many different things happening at the same time. And then also, we also work on a network level where we're working on guidelines and policies and manuals, and making sure that the network has the tools and resources needed to implement their projects that we might not be directly involved with.
Yeah, do you have a team underneath you? Like, do you have a staff of your own, or is this?
Oh no, that's just me.
That's all you? Okay. Yeah, based on what you explained in my head, just referencing my experiences, I was an Army officer. I'm like, okay, cool. I would have a staff to do some of these things, right?
Yeah.
But you're just doing all of that? Wow.
I did convince my supervisor to hire an intern, and she's been really helpful with a lot of the projects that I've been on. But yeah, our whole team, they do this on a daily basis. We just hired 2 extra people, which is really nice. So now we've been growing, which is great. But yeah, our department just works on that. And then we have other teams that work on, solely on the business development side, where they're writing the proposals and coordinating that whole process. We have a whole team dedicated to implementing the project. So our project managers, so they're directly the ones that are managing the program when we just support them. We have a whole department who's working on the financial side of making sure we're on budget, things like that. And we just like technical advisors that are helping with specific things like the health and nutrition, or the WASH, which is water, sanitation, and hygiene. We have technical advisors to help with that. So it's a very large team doing very specific things. But our team works directly with the monitoring, evaluation, and then accountability and learning.
Yeah, that makes sense, because yours is more touch points to do the evaluation side. You're not necessarily managing all of those
Correct.
projects.
Correct. Yeah, we just support all of that.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. That I have to remember that. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. That's not as bad as I think.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so you know, if there's someone who's interested in the humanitarian space, getting involved with organizations, like what do you think is what would you recommend someone to do to get to your sort of where you're at? Because I don't think very many people have an understanding of the humanitarian industry in general. Like I
Hmm.
definitely don't. And your path seems to sort of jump around a little bit, like a lot of internships in the very beginning, and then you went into the army, so kind of a public policy uh, government organization that gives you a broader understanding of probably metrics and and public health. Then you were able to get yourself into ADRA. Is that a normal path? Do you think that that's a recommendation you would give? Like, hey, do a lot of internships, get a public health degree, and try to work for the government for a little bit, then like get perspective there, then go into this, or are there more direct paths, or how have you seen other people do it?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, definitely it was not linear at all. It was very my journey was very unique. I don't recommend getting a music degree and then going to public health. You can do music for fun on the side without having to get a degree. I mean, I enjoy music still, obviously, but yeah, I don't recommend doing that. But public health is one way to get into the humanitarian sector. It is not the only way, and I think that's the beauty of public health and the humanitarian sector is that there are multiple ways to get into it. So public health, like in our cohort alone, we had, I mean, a music major. We had someone who had a theology degree, someone who did anthropology, someone who was a nurse, someone who was a doctor. It was a mixed bag. So which was really cool. So I mean, anyone who's interested in public health can get into a public health program, even if you don't have a health background. Um, and there's so many different avenues to get into once you are in public health. You don't have to go the humanitarian aid route. You can do other things too, which is really cool about that. Humanitarian aid itself and the humanitarian sector, I should say, there's also different avenues to get into it. I really recommend getting as much experience, maybe through an internship or even a volunteer experience, into it to make sure that that's obviously what you're interested in doing. Um, but yeah, you don't. There's no one way to get into the humanitarian sector. Like if you talk to a lot of my colleagues, yeah, some of them do have this global health, public health degree that I also have, but other people have international relations, business. As I said, we have a whole finance team that helps us. So obviously they did finance or accounting. So that's one way to do it as well. If project management is not necessarily your thing. Um, yeah, we if you talk to all of my colleagues, they have a very varying level of different experiences, degrees, and no one's route was or journey was the same. And I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. What do you think is the draw that pulls people into this uh, work?
That's a really good question. I think we all have this common goal of um, making this world a better place, of making sure that communities around the world have what they need to live a dignified life, with the basic necessities like food and water and shelter. Um, we all want to help. We want to help people. We want to help communities. Um, I mean, if you look at the world, there's a lot of suffering going on, right? There's droughts, there's earthquakes, there's war, there's everything in between, and we just want to alleviate that suffering in some little way possible. And I think that's the common goal that we all have.
Mm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So because of it, people can come from it from all sorts of different angles. In being a member of the humanitarian space, the or ecosystem, the would you say that mid-career transition is a very uh, common thing then? Like, are there a lot of people who worked certain jobs and then realize, this is, I'd rather take my skill sets and put it into the humanitarian space? Is that common to see like older people transition in? Or is it generally like a young person's industry?
I think it's both, honestly. I think that you can take your skills that you have. So if you're mid-career, you can take the skills that you have and apply it to the humanitarian sector. So for instance, something like communications or marketing, you can take that experience that you already have and apply it to the humanitarian sector. Um, or for instance, like finance or project management, you can take that experience and apply it to the humanitarian sector. I think there are a lot of entry level young people who, that's what they want to do. They want to work in the humanitarian sector, and so that they just look for opportunities in that realm, which I think is also really cool. And then work their way up, or try out different things in the humanitarian sector. So I think there's multiple ways to do it, and there's multiple ways to get into the humanitarian sector. You don't necessarily have to start from day one. You could start mid career or even end of career. If you, hey, I want to change, I want to do something good for the world. And yeah, that's the
Yeah.
basic. Yeah.
Okay. Is is a degree required to go into this sector? And I know your early days were a lot of internships. Can people survive off of these internships? Like, are uh, is the living expenses paid for by a lot of these organizations? Maybe you might not be getting paid a lot, but is living, housing provided and food provided and things like that during these internships? Just thinking of a person who may not necessarily have the resources to, go to school and then take some time off. Is that something that they could still pursue?
Yeah, so that's a really good question because I think it really depends on what internship you get. There are organizations out there that will pay you a decent wage and you can live off of it. There are other organizations who think you are free labor and they will barely pay you anything, or not pay you anything at all. Um, and so it really depends on the organization that you're interning for. And that's something that you should ask when you interview for, or, even on the job application, if they say like, hey, we do pay, X amount, or, this is a paid internship. Um, if you're able to do an unpaid internship, that's great. More power to you. It's probably still gonna be really great experience. But generally, I would look for a paid internship, um, and some of them paid better than others, and so you just have to look for that.
Okay, that's good to know that there's paid internships out there. Sometimes I just have this mindset of like, oh, as an internship, a lot of times it's just unpaid in my mind for some reason. But that's good. That's good to know that.
Yeah, it it really depends. So, for instance, for ADRA, um, our office, we do provide paid internships. So the current intern with our unit, she was hired through the Bridge program. That is a paid internship. I will say that I have hired interns for a different office within our network. It was an unpaid internship, unfortunately, but because it was remote, it was a lot easier to convince someone to do an unpaid internship, just to get the experience. And eventually, one of them was hired by the office, and she works full time for them now, which
Oh,
is
that's
really
great.
cool. Yeah, so it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That the opportunity is that very common. Go to the internship and then get hired by the organization that you work for, or is it sort of it? It depends again on the organization. If they look at you as just free labor, they might want to keep you as free labor. Is that a mixed bag as well?
Yeah, it is. It really depends, one, on the organization. If they value that, where they put the energy and time into training you to be able to hire you afterwards. There are other organizations that are just like, yeah, free labor, great, okay, bye, after 3 or 6 months, um, things like that. But yeah, it depends on the organization if that is a route. I will say that ADRA does value interns, and we try to hire um, those that that stay on for longer periods of time and are able to be hired full time afterwards.
That's great. So, kind of taken a lot of your time already. And is there any last pieces of advice that you'd like to impart on the to the audience, or about life, about your the career in general, or maybe just ADRA? Like, I don't know if there's anything you want to talk about there, but feel free to. This is your opportunity.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the advice I would give to people is, get as much experience as you can in a varying amount of different sectors, because you might not know what you want to do, and so volunteer experiences or internships or just traveling is one way to get out there and experience things and really figure out what you want to do with your life. So I really appreciate the opportunities that I had to be able to do that. um, I also think that um, saying yes to things that you might not think um, you want to do is a good idea as well. So, for instance, like, I mean, I didn't really want to work for the Army because I didn't understand it, but it ended up being a really great experience. And for my current position, um, I just kind of interviewed because I was like, well, I'll just get the experience for interviewing, but I landed this job that I love, with an organization that I love too. So just saying yes to things that you might not be sure about um, is some advice that I would give to someone.
That's really good advice. I think I kind of live off that as well, so I really like it. How can people reach you if they're interested in learning more about the humanitarian career, or maybe ADRA in general?
Right. So you can always check out our organization at adra.org, ADRA.org. We have a lot of opportunities, so like internships, jobs. We also have volunteer positions through what we call ADRA Connections. Those are volunteer trips that we lead around the world. So that's one way to get involved. We're on social media. You can check us out. If you need to reach out to me to ask any questions about career or how to get into the humanitarian world or about my journey, you can reach me at speaker@adra.org.
Perfect. Wait, can you talk a little bit about those like volunteer trips? Like, how does that work? I'm just curious because now I'm thinking, do I want to do something like this?
Yeah, of course. So we have what we call ADRA Connections. It's a volunteer opportunity where we take groups of people to some of our project areas, and we do different project activities. I think they've done things like helping build schools, um, build wells, different opportunities where you get to be in a community and really learn about it, and learn what the needs are, and just lend a hand out, and just widen your worldview. So yeah, that's through Azure Connections.
Oh, that's perfect. Do they just pay for the plane ticket there then, and then everything's kind of taken care for like at on site, or how does that process
So
work?
that's a really good question because I don't work really closely with this team. So I think is like there's a set fee, and certain things are covered within that fee, but everything is organized through our trip leaders, through our team, um, and so yeah, you just go and volunteer and really just be there to learn and support and things like that.
Okay, yeah, that sounds exciting. I'm gonna check it out just to see
Yeah.
what it's about. Well, thank you so much, Keri, for sharing your story on the Life of a Career podcast. We really enjoyed having you here and hearing about the humanitarian sector, which is fascinating because I don't think a lot of people understand it. So,
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
hey, thanks for joining us at Mentor Access. If you like what you just watched, please click like and subscribe, and also hit that bell so that you get notified when we have new videos come out. Thank you for supporting our mission.